Hey, I'm a fan of these twin lens reflex cameras. These double lens monsters that look kind of weird but are so much fun to work with. So I thought, let's talk about these a bit. I will talk a little bit about the history, about the construction and architecture of these cameras. Let's take a look at a few different models that are available. Let's talk about the pros and cons, because there are both of those. And then last but not least, let me show you some pictures that I think sort of reflect and show you some of the possibilities and maybe reasons why I like these cameras so much. So the history of these cameras, these dual lens cameras, goes all the way back to 1800s. 1885, a UK-based company, London Stereoscopic, created a camera called Carlton, which is considered to be the first commercially available dual lens camera. But then in 1929, a Rolleiflex was introduced. And Rolleiflex, the original Rolleiflex from Germany, the first really mass-marketed, commercially viable TLR camera. And pretty much all the TLR cameras after the Rolleiflex were more or less copies of the original Rolleiflex design. Now these TLR cameras, they had their prime days in the 50s and 60s, and then they were gradually replaced by more modern design. In addition to Rolleiflexes and Rolleicords, there's plenty of really interesting Japanese cameras. For example, Mamiyas were built all the way to 1994, and these Rolleiflexes were built surprisingly all the way to 2014 through a couple of different company restructuring and all that. Now, one of the reasons they are living such a renaissance today got to be the looks. I mean, they look like no other cameras, but that's not the only thing that separates them from other cameras. So let's take a look at a little bit about the architecture and how these cameras have been constructed. But before we go there, let's talk about another camera architecture, SLR, single lens reflex. Most of the cameras that you see today, both digital and analog, are single lens reflex cameras. With the exception of the new mirrorless cameras, that is a new design, and then also the high-end rangefinder cameras, film cameras like Leicas. Those are different architectures, but most of the cameras that look like these are called single lens reflex cameras. These come in different sizes and shapes, you know. These both basically share the same architecture. Now let me first show you, before we go into twin lens cameras, let me show you how these cameras work. Basically all cameras have two functions that they need to somehow fulfill. Of course, you need to be able to get the picture into your film. That's obviously the primary work of a camera. But then in addition to that, you need to be able, as a photographer, you need to be able to focus and compose your picture. So somehow you need to be able to see the picture as a photographer, and then the film needs to be able to see the same picture. Now, with these single lens cameras, the challenge has been solved with a mirror that moves. Let me show you. Let me remove the lens. And if you look inside of such a camera, there's a mirror. You know, if you then take a picture with this camera, let's say I want to take a picture of my coffee mug. You know, there is a mirror in 35-degree angle. So the picture of this coffee mug goes into the camera, and then through this mirror is reflected up and then can be seen from the viewfinder. Whether the viewfinder is like this or whether the viewfinder is like that you look from behind. But in both cases, the actual reflection happens through a mirror in a 45 degrees angle within the camera. And then when you take the picture and you press the shutter, the mirror is now preventing the light from going to the film. So something needs to happen. And how these cameras solve the problem is that when I press the shutter release, the mirror moves up, away from the film plate. Take a look at this. And now there's a clear path from your subject all the way to the film plane. Now there's a mirror, and when I press the shutter, the mirror goes away. All these cameras work the same way. Some more advanced move it immediately back down again. Some, like this old Kiev, needs you to cock the shutter and then it moves the mirror back to the original position so that you can see, you know, your composition and focus through the viewfinder. This is a single lens reflex camera, moving mirror. Now the twin reflex camera has solved the same problem in a slightly different way. So once again, you need to be able to get the picture on your film, but also to the eyes of the photographer. How this camera has solved the problem is that first the image goes through the upper lens, and there is the same way there is in the previous camera, there's a mirror that tilts the light upwards, and then you can view the image from the viewfinder. And like in these cameras, you can also have a prism viewfinder so that you can look at it from the angle like this. Most people don't use those prism viewfinders with TLR cameras, but you know, that's not really the architecture of these cameras. It's just the way you want to use them. So the upper lens gives the picture to the photographer, and then the lower lens takes the picture to the film plane. And when the user then takes the picture, there's no need to move the mirror, because you only need to open the shutter in the lower lens, and it doesn't really matter if the mirror is still, you know, tilting the image upwards, because it's a different lens. So, and because the lenses are practically similar, what the photographer sees is almost identical to what goes to the film plate. This simplifies the structure of the camera, no moving parts, but then it needs another lens, so that complicates the camera. Comme ci, comme ça. I mean, you bow to another direction and then you... So then we can conclude that the biggest difference between these two camera systems is that because of the moving mirror and more complex mechanical design, these SLR cameras do not need another lens. And the consequences of these differences, you know, those we're gonna discuss a bit in a minute. Okay, then let's take a look at an architecture of a TLR camera a little bit closer. Basically up here you get a hood. The main purpose of this hood is just to prevent the light to reflect, and it's kind of makes it easier to focus and aim your pictures. This hood also has a little aid here, a magnifying glass that pops up and allows you to focus a little bit more accurately if you really want to use the magnifying glass. Also, it has what is called a sports finder that allows you to aim the camera like this if this is what you want to do. In some of these cameras you can remove the hood, and then underneath there's a viewing glass. That's where the upper lens reflects the picture for the photographer to see it and aim and compose the picture. Now you can also purchase a prism viewfinder to these cameras, that you replace the hood with the prism finder, and then you can even more accurately use your camera like that. I don't like those, they make these bulky and I don't but it's a personal preference, so some people do like them. So then there are two practically similar lenses. Now the upper lens can be a little bit more simpler. It doesn't have the aperture settings, it doesn't have a shutter. The only reason for it to exist is to show you as a photographer the image. Then the lower lens is typically the better quality. It has the aperture plates, aperture settings, and it has a shutter built in. That's the one that takes the picture. These lenses are typically 75, 80mm lenses, f2.8, f3.5. So a normal lens comparable to 50mm lens in your full frame digital camera. There are wide angle lenses, there are tele lenses, but these are more rare. Typically a normal lens. You focus the camera using this little knob here, and when you move the knob you can see that both lenses move parallel to make sure that the focus is same both for the photographer and then for the film. You advance the film using a crank or using a knob depending on your camera model. You open the camera back like this, and here are your film spools, and the film goes to the back of the camera. So a very simple construction actually, very little to go wrong, and that's one of the benefits of these TLR cameras. There are many accessories available. You can get different kind of filters, and you can also get close-up lenses to most of these. These close-up lenses are really nice for portraits or macro photos, and they always come in pair. So when you change the focal length of the lower lens, you need to do the same for the upper lens. Other accessories are available. If you think about the shape of a TLR camera, and if you put it on a tripod, you can easily create fairly substantial forces underneath the camera because it's so high and sort of top heavy. That's why Rolleiflex has introduced a special tripod mount that you can put underneath the camera, and it makes it a little bit more sturdy, and I always find more assuring to put this underneath my camera before I put it on a tripod. It's not absolutely necessary if you are careful, but I'm not, so I need this. Then you can get all kind of other accessories. There are range finders available. There's a system that allows you to use 35mm film. I have a sheet film adapter, so you can use sheet film here. So a lot of things that you can attach these with, depending on your purpose. Most of these TLR cameras are medium format cameras, and they shoot 6x6 square negative sizes. Okay, moving on. So let me now then show you a few different TLR camera models. This is the top of the line Rolleiflex, and I made a couple of videos already about this, so I don't want to talk more about this. This is just gorgeous. There are plenty of amazing, excellent Japanese TLR cameras. These are almost exact copies of the Rolleiflexes. These are reasonably priced and of excellent quality. Yashica has a few different models, and these Yashicas have absolutely excellent lenses. They are joy to use, plenty of accessories, very well built. So Yashica, really a nice TLR camera. Even the older ones, there's another Yashica Flex. This is an older version, a little bit beaten up, but takes really beautiful pictures. Minolta Autocore, a Japanese nice camera. Then there's a cheaper brother for the Rolleiflex, a Rolleicord. I also made a film about this. This is probably my favorite, or the TLR camera that I would suggest to anybody looking into this is a genuine Rolei. It is a little bit, simpler construction than the Rolei Flex, but I claim that it is the same quality. So a Rolei cord, a really nice camera. And then if you want something slightly different, there's a range of Mamiya TLR cameras. As you can see, these Mamiyas are a little bit bigger than these other cameras for a reason. These Mamiyas are really professional cameras, and they have a couple of characteristics that you don't really find in any other TLR cameras. Most notably, you can change the lens. Now these lenses come in pair, and they vary from, telelenses all the way to wide angle lenses. These are very sturdy construction, very well built. And then these Mamiyas have one more really nice feature. When you focus with the Rolei Flex, you can focus to about 90 centimeters, a little bit less than 1 meter, because this just doesn't extend any further. But the Mamiya has a built-in bellows, and it just keeps on extending. So you can focus really close. You can actually shoot almost macro with just a regular Mamiya. These Mamiyas are totally different to use than these other TLRs. It is heavier, it's bulkier, it is more versatile. So it depends on what do you really want. Now, do you want the bellows? Do you want interchangeable lenses? More of a system? Or do you want a compact, really tight package? I'm more in this Rolei Flex camp, but I know many people who would prefer a Mamiya. C330, C220, they come in different models and different shapes, but all the lenses are interchangeable. Now, in addition to these models that I have here, a few other honorable mentions. Flexoret from Czechoslovakia. Really cool looking Art Deco kind of a camera. Takes excellent picture, really nice lens. Can be found dirt cheap if you are lucky. Keep in mind, Flexoret. Then there are two really cheap ones. Soviet-made Lubitel and then the Chinese Seagull. Yeah, I can't talk about those two cameras in the same episode with these. They go more into the Holga territory. So, high-end cameras, Rolei Flex, Mamiya, really affordable, good quality camera, these Japanese, and my favorite, my suggestion, a Rolei cord. Plenty to choose from, huh? So then, let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of these cameras. Like any construction, there are certain compromises that you needed to make when building these cameras, and that's why I guess these were sort of replaced by SLR cameras, because some of the shortcomings are, well, they really are shortcomings. But on a positive note, let's start from pros. I think most of these cameras are excellent quality, so you get excellent medium format images. Lenses, especially Rolei Flexes, Mamiyas, these Japanese, the lenses are top notch. These are very reliable cameras, being a simple construction, very little moving parts. They seem to last a long time. They are typically not prone to light leaks. I find these cameras extremely reliable and also easy to maintain if that needs to happen. I find these very easy and user-friendly to operate. They are ready to shoot immediately and they are very quiet. That helps you if you want to take a picture without being noticed, or you are in the situation that you don't want to get loud noise. You know, there are no moving mirrors, so the noise that you get from these cameras when shooting is, you know, it's very quiet. And once again, because there are no moving mirrors, and there is a leaf shutter that sort of expands to all the directions, there's hardly any physical movement when you take a picture. And that makes the camera very steady when you take the pictures. I successfully take pictures with 1/15th of a second with the TLR camera, handheld. If I press it against my chest and take a picture, it is surprising how slow speeds you can use. And it is because there are no moving mirrors. In an extremely fast-paced situation, when you, for example, want to make sure that the movement of a person is in a certain stage, you know, there is not any lag between you pressing the shutter and the camera taking the picture. So in some cases that can be beneficial. These are very good street photography cameras, candid cameras, because, you know, people don't almost recognize that you are taking pictures when you are looking down like this and just aiming from here. So very nice for street photography. Also the fact that they are immediately ready to go, that's good. And I like these cases. Almost all of them come with this kind of a leather case, and it is very easy to carry on your, you know, on your shoulder, and you know, very fast to take into use. You know, I always keep them in these containers, and because they are mostly kept in these containers, they are more often than not in a very good mechanical and visual state. So you can find almost a pristine TLR because it lived all its life within the leather jacket. And then last but not least, from the pro side, I mean, these are just absolutely joy to use. But this is more a personal opinion, but you know, I find them so enjoyable. So what are then some of the cons? I mean, there are plenty. Of course, there are no interchangeable lenses other than the Mamiyas, but then you get a fairly bulky camera. Okay, then you get a leaf shutter, quiet, no movement practically, but then they only go up to 1/500th of a second, or not even to that. Some of the older cameras don't even go up to 1/500th of the second, so you are lacking the really fast speeds. Some find it difficult to aim at compose from the viewfinder, and that is because the image is laterally reversed. What does that mean? It means that when you move the camera like this, the picture moves to another direction. Let me try to show you what I mean. Now I can guarantee that in the beginning this confuses the heck out of you. But I can also guarantee that if you keep on trying it a day or two, it becomes a second nature. For me, I don't even notice that it goes to a different direction. It feels very natural to me, and it doesn't slow me down a bit. So you will learn that if I can learn that. So, but it is certainly something that some people think as a problem with the TLR camera. And then there is a thing called a parallax error. Now let me show you what I mean. There are two lenses on top of each other, and if you aim to something further away, you know, the difference between these two lenses, you know, it doesn't really matter. It's just a fraction of a millimeter. So, you know, you might get theoretically a slightly different picture through the viewfinder because it becomes from a higher vantage point than the one that goes on the film, but it doesn't really matter. But if you really get close, you know, to, you know, a meter, meter and a half, this difference starts to play a role. If I demonstrate it here, take a look at this number 12. So, you know, this upper lens sort of aims above number 12 and this lower lens goes below number 12. So you can see that if I was able to aim this close, I would get a totally different picture from high up here than down here. Now, when you get further away, the problem gets smaller and smaller. But in the close-up situations, some cameras like the Rolleiflex, like the Mamiya, they have an inbuilt system that compensates this parallax error. But some of these cheaper cameras don't have that, and you need to keep that in mind, that if you get really close, there is a slight difference between these two lenses. For these close-up lenses that I showed you earlier, the upper lens that we attach to the upper lens, it takes care of this parallax error, so no need to worry about it when you are using the close-up lenses. But certainly this parallax error is a thing that you need to recognize and pay attention to that if you are taking close-up pictures. So as you can see, there are pros and cons. There are compromises in each and every architecture. In an SLR camera, the compromise is the mirror movement, is the more complex system that moves the mirror, the movement within the camera when you are taking the picture. Whereas with the TLR camera, the compromise mostly comes from the fact that there are two lenses. That adds a little bit to the cost. And then some complexities, especially in the close-up situations. Pros and cons. But to me, and to my photography, I think that the pros significantly overweight the cons. And TLR cameras are my favorite cameras. And I really learned to enjoy shooting these cameras. This Rolleiflex is my mostly used camera. And I've shot, like hundreds and hundreds of rolls of film with my Rolleiflex and with my other TLR cameras. So let me show you some of the pictures and explain what the fact that they were taken with a TLR camera brought to that picture. Why I think that I probably would not have taken exactly that kind of picture with any other camera model. So let's take a look. So first, a picture of my dad. Look at the angle of this picture. It was really a candid situation. He didn't even realize I'm taking the picture. So TLR was really a perfect tool for this photo. And then a few street photos. Now the candid nature of this camera, really people not recognizing that I'm taking a picture is a huge advantage in the street photography situation. And now then, since I can aim with this camera, by looking from up, I can put it really down low and get interesting perspective. I've also learned to use it upside down like this, high up. And this gives me a possibility to shoot over the crowd. The close-up lens gives me a possibility to get really close. And then the overall quality, especially the quality of these lenses, gives you so good pictures every time you shoot, and they always, pleasantly surprise me with their quality. So as you can probably see, I like TLR cameras. It's partially intangible and I can't really explain why. They fit into my photographic style and they just feel right to me. And I think that shows in my picture. I typically get better pictures with my TLR cameras than with any other cameras. Whether that would be the same thing for you, I really don't know. You should try. And since you can get, especially these Japanese TLR cameras, in a fairly reasonable price, I strongly recommend that you try this out. Why wouldn't you? Life is short.